The story we're going to report now is utterly crazy. It's reputed to involve a massive cover-up by several Massachusetts state police troopers, cops from the town of Canton, as well as officials from the county DA's office. If true, a little over a year ago, a Boston cop was brutally beaten to death by another Boston cop and by that cop's brother's son. He was also attacked by the cop's German Shepherd. He was then left for dead on the lawn during a snowstorm. The beating was witnessed by other cops at the house where the attack occurred, and a conspiracy quickly formed to cover it up. That conspiracy involved framing the girlfriend of the dead officer. A couple of friends of this channel who work in law enforcement tipped me off about this morning. The source is a small publisher called TB Daily News. People from my area recognize this TB as Turtle Boy, an online journalist who has connections with a lot of police. The story is linked below. It's somewhat poorly written and organized, but it's also comprehensive and convincing. It's very detailed and reveals a very elaborate conspiracy to frame the cop's girlfriend. The evidence is compelling. The links to which these people went in order to orchestrate a conspiracy suitable for a complicated Hollywood film is hard to believe. But as I said, and as you'll see, it is compelling. It's based on court documents provided by the defendant's attorneys, as well as what seems to be at least one anonymous inside source. An amazing part of this story is the nature of some of the evidence, which uses cell phones and health apps on those phones to not only track their owners' searches and their communications, and of course their locations, but also the actual steps that they take, including the stairs that they climb. And this was important for the case. The girlfriend is currently awaiting manslaughter charges. If the story proves true, the charges are unjust and the real killers have not been indicted or even properly investigated yet. In fact, and I'm sorry to say this, it goes to the heart of why many people in this country no longer trust law enforcement or prosecutors, the very system of authority. It's a wild story, and I'm putting this out quickly, but I'll do my best to react to the details. January 28th, 2022, a snowy, cold New England night. Downtown Canton, Massachusetts is just outside Boston. John O'Keefe, a 16-year veteran of the Boston Police Department, is drinking at McCarthy's bar with his girlfriend, Karen Reed. They've been dating a couple of years, and she was essentially living with him at this point, and his two children that he had custody of. They weren't his kids. Reed is attractive and accomplished, a college professor. O'Keefe was highly regarded on the Boston police force. Around 9 p.m., they left McCarthy's and walked across the street to another bar called the Waterfall. It's hard to tell from the story, but I'd guess that other cops were at the Waterfall. The couple soon socialized with someone they knew, whose name was Jennifer McCabe. When it got late and the bar was closing, word was everyone was going to an after-hours party at someone's house. That someone was another Boston cop named Brian Albert. Though both men worked for the Boston Police Department, they weren't well acquainted. So O'Keefe was a little unsure about showing up based only on an invitation by McCabe. But McCabe's sister was married to Albert. Reed decided she didn't want to go, but instead would drop off her boyfriend and then go home. Their home was only 3 miles away. O'Keefe would get home on his own. On their way to Albert's, O'Keefe texted McCabe for more precise directions. When they arrived, Reed waited in her SUV to make sure O'Keefe was welcome. While she waited, one witness was also waiting in his car, Ryan Nagel, who had not been inside this house, but was there to pick up his sister, who was partying inside. According to Nagel, he sat in his car about 5 minutes. He had seen Reed's SUV pulling up, and she wasn't driving erratically. When he left, he observed only the woman, Reed, inside the SUV. So inside that SUV, while she was waiting to make sure O'Keefe was welcome in the party, Reed texted him several times. He didn't text back, so she finally left. Presumably, police have those texts and can confirm all that. According to the charges against Karen Reed, it was at this point that she accidentally ran over her boyfriend and unwittingly left him there to die. He wasn't discovered until she and McCabe and another friend went back to look for him hours later, a little after 6 a.m. That's the story blasted over the airwaves in Boston last year for several days and trumpeted in the Boston Globe. Karen Reed's life has been destroyed. But is this really what happened? The first clues that it wasn't comes from O'Keefe's injuries. His arm had 6 bloodied lacerations. Both eyes were swollen shut and black and blue. One eyelid had a cut. Clothes were covered in blood and vomit. He had a cut in his nose, a 2-inch laceration on the back of his head, multiple skull fractures. Could those injuries have come from being backed over accidentally by a car coming from a parked position? Doesn't sound like it. The next clue comes from the cell phone of Jennifer McCabe, and this is why you have to have good lawyers. Reed's attorneys filed a motion within 2 days demanding a forensic audit of the cell phones of Jennifer McCabe and Brian Albert. I'm not sure why, but probably because of the nature of the injuries. Well, this is what turned up. At 2:27 a.m., while supposedly not knowing O'Keefe wasn't at home snug in bed, Jennifer McCabe searched with these words, "How long to die in the cold?" The prosecutors hid this from Reed's defense team for over a year, and they didn't put it in the official report. What's more, at 6:30 a.m., just after they'd, quote, discovered O'Keefe in the snow, Jennifer McCabe was worried about her search from a few hours before. She was obviously concerned that she had become an accomplice in the cover-up of a homicide, because she now repeated those same search terms about dying in the cold, and then later suggested to police that Reed had twice asked her to do this. She also deleted all her communications from that time period. I told you it was complicated. This was not a planned homicide. It was very late and they were all drunk. Yet they all had the presence of mind to plan an elaborate frame-up and even think of little details like this. Okay, there's more. The health app on O'Keefe's phone showed that he entered the house, walked up 3 flights, and walked 36 steps on that 3rd floor. He was inside the house about 10 minutes. Then he's tracked leaving the house. So unless he was sneaking around the house, the witnesses at the party are lying. So just what happened inside? What do Reed's defense lawyers claim? I want to be careful here. I'm going to report what TB News Daily reports, but everyone should be cautious about unproven allegations. The Alberts are a powerful family, apparently, in Canton. Brian Albert is a highly decorated cop who's been showcased on the TV show Boston's Finest. He's also a boxer and an MMA fighter, as you can see in the photo, he looks like a tough guy. His brother Chris is on the board of selectmen. Chris just happens to live a couple of doors up from O'Keefe. Chris has a son, Colin, who is described as a hothead. At the time of O'Keefe's death, Colin was 18 and a star on the high school football team. His Facebook posts and his pics show that even at this young age, he liked to drink, he liked to fight. He's a big kid. There's an interesting photo taken just a few days after O'Keefe's death. It shows Colin's knuckles covered in freshly scabbed wounds. Look, I spent my life in the bar industry. Those are the wounds you get from punching someone in their head with your fist. The TB reports that it's confirmed that Colin was at the house the night O'Keefe was killed. To be sure, he might have left before then. He might have damaged his knuckles somewhere else. I want to read this next thing word for word from TB Daily News, because he's using anonymous sources here. So again, approach this with all due caution. Begin quote. After O'Keefe got to Albert's home, he began texting McCabe to make sure she was there, and she was the only person he knew well. When he entered, he was surprised to see 18-year-old Colin Albert was there, who confronted him at some point and hit him. Our sources believe that Brian Albert joined in on the beating, alarming his loyal German Shepherd, which immediately began to tear into O'Keefe's arm. End quote. So again, he reported, our sources believe. This suggests these sources were not there in the house. In fact, they might not even have spoken to anyone who was there. Probably all just speculation. So I'm hesitant to mention the name Colin Albert, who's now, I guess, a 19-year-old kid. The only reason I am mentioning it, well, it's the photo of those knuckles. But he's innocent until proven guilty, and at this point, I haven't seen any evidence he was there in the house when whatever happened, happened. But I have seen enough compelling evidence that a cover-up took place. There's a lot more in the article, and I'm running low on time, but O'Keefe's injuries suggest something else went on. And there's a lot more. A trooper assigned to handle the case is a close friend of the Alberts. The initial report filed by the local police was quickly altered in an incriminating way. A different photo was later inserted, and Brian Albert's cell phone number was mysteriously changed to a secondary phone. We now know that McCabe called the Albert house from the car at 6:30 a.m. when she arrived with the defendant, Reed, and another of her accomplices. Strangely, Albert did not leave his house to investigate what was going on outside. Even though McCabe had apparently alerted his house with the call, as I said, police seem to have tried to cover all this up. So a fellow Boston cop was dead on their front lawn, and they didn't think it important enough to come outside. That's suspicious. When Jennifer McCabe got home earlier from after the party, so I think around 2 o'clock, this was before Reed called her at 6 a.m. to say Keefe was missing, her phone showed she stayed up pacing all night. They were thinking through all the details of their conspiracy. They seemed to even have thought to bust Reed's taillight, part of a plan to actually convince her that she accidentally ran over her boyfriend. The deputy police chief lives right across the street, has a doorbell video camera, but of course it picked up nothing. Look, there's no way Jennifer McCabe or Jennifer McCabe working with the Alberts could have orchestrated all this on their own. They needed help from multiple investigative agencies, or at least people working for those agencies, to cover this up. Local DA, the Canton police, the state police, perhaps the medical examiner. Evidence was there and it was kept from the defense teams. I don't normally buy into conspiracies involving a lot of people and multiple agencies. It's too hard to pull off. Not enough incentive for everyone to throw away their lives or their careers. But sometimes someone, a criminal or someone guilty of something, only has to sell people on a narrative and then use their influence and their powers of manipulation to nudge things in that direction. We're talking about powerful people with a lot of friends. And no one wants to upset the apple cart by challenging it. Now, I have my own inside source. He knew Brian Albert before he was a cop. He says Brian seemed like a nice kid. However, my source also believes this story. He's in law enforcement. He's shocked because he knew Albert well and liked him. He believes Albert is highly intelligent and capable of being narcissistic and manipulative. A source also got me the motions filed by the defendants. If I can't link them in the comments section, anyone can message me for the PDFs. I've also been told that the FBI is possibly now taking over this story. So you know the drill, guys. Hit subscribe and notify, or I'll send the Canton police your way.